Hi guy, welcome to episode 12 of the AMIGArama podcast. I'm your host Lorfarius, and for this week we are going to be having a look at Woody's World. But before we jump into the game, I thought we would have a look at some news. First up, I have basically spent several days putting a website together on the AMIGArama.com. Now, this has come together quite well, I think. I've not really done a website on my own like this before, so it did take some effort. Quite clunky problems as well, dealing with web hosts and costs and all the rest of it and putting it all together. But after several days, I'm quite proud with what I've achieved, and I think it looks fantastic. So by all means, guys, please go and have a look and let me know what you think. I mean, there's proper comment sections on there now, so it's not as, ugly and random, I don't think, as it was before. I've also been able to set up an AMIGArama email address. Basically, if you want to send any messages to me, you submit to have a look at on the show or comments or anything like that, it's Lorfarius@AMIGArama.com. I will reply to them. I've not had any emails yet beyond the odd one, but I'm really looking forward to using it. Now, one of the things I did realise as I was putting all this website together is just how expensive things like hosting. I mean, I've just had to fork out for a higher level on the actual podcast hosting side, and then his websites and then domains and all the rest of it. So I thought, well, it seems to be the way forward, and I don't want to be begging for money or anything like that. So I've gone and put a Patreon link up on the site, which I've already got a Patreon supporter on, which is a chap called O'Brien's Retro and Vintage. He does have a website, which is at allbrians.no, and he basically sells all sorts of retro gear and loads and loads of Amiga mags, because he's offered to send me something through the post to do with a magazine, which I'm quite looking forward to, but we'll come back at a later date. But yeah, I'm really proud of the website. Like I say, it's all off my own back. It's all come together quite well. It seems to load pretty quickly, so go and have a look and let me know what you think. Now, as another aside, I do actually have a Twitter account. Obviously, I mentioned it before, which is at AMIGArama Pod. I post on that quite regularly, and one of the things I have been doing is digging out scans from like magazine and adverts and box covers and game shots and things like that, and I post that quite regular on there, and I'm not doing too bad at them. I think I've got about 100 followers so far. So, if you want some regular Amiga news, I'm on there constantly, so it's at AMIGArama Pod. So come and follow me, you won't regret it. Now, let's have a look at some regular news items that I've managed to find in the last week. Basically, someone's going to release a game called Road Trip, which was apparently created in just 12 days. Now, from the looks of it, it reminds me of Ghostbusters. Bloody hell, I'm going back a long while now. On the ZX Spectrum and the C64, like the drive-in sections, but the other way around. That sounds very, very bizarre because it's a side-on driving, but you'll know what I mean if you go and have a look at the video. It's very similar style to that. It's very classic 8-bit, and there's a very nice mix of what's like techno music, and it's thumping and banging and all, and his voice is mixed in there, and it's it's what's supposed to be a small project. It come out really, really well. I will stick a link into the show notes, as always. Next up, I noticed this just yesterday, actually. Someone is doing a re-release or another version, I don't know what to call it, of Bomb Jack. Now, originally when this came out on the Amiga, it's a bit slow, it's very clunky, it's your typical licensed port. It sort of looks like the arcade, but it's not really a touch on it. But someone's come along to create the Bomb Jack Beer Edition. He basically I don't know why he's called it the Beer Edition. It seems to be, it's just because all he has is memories of playing the arcade and drinking beer at the time. Very, very odd. The graphics are really close to the arcade. The main character moves silky smooth and flies about, and the explosions just look fantastic. and I did a bit of a close look at like the main version on YouTube and this, and it's hard pressed to tell the difference, and it's really good that someone would go back to poorer license title at the time and come up with something much, much better. And I'm looking forward to that one. It doesn't actually say when it's going to come out, but it does have an expected release date of February time. So with any luck, I'll be able to cover it in more detail when I finally get my hands on a copy. But yeah, I think that's it for the news this week. I will remind you, please go and have a look at AMIGArama.com, because I've made this site for you guys to have a look at, and any comments, any suggestions or improvements of things. I mean, I'm using WordPress to do this, so even if I'm missing like possible tools which you think, because I'm not used to using that as a platform or anything, but I think I've done a pretty good job. Yeah, remember, that's AMIGArama.com. Tell all your friends, it's awesome. Now, it's time to move on to this week's game, and I've gone with Woody's World. Now, the reason behind this was, I was doing my usual, going through a list of games, asking people for recommendations and stuff, and I was really looking for like hidden gems and something that not many people have talked about or covered before, and I don't think you could get more of a perfect match for a game like that than Woody's World, because it's not very well known, but from my experience with it, it was well worth having a go with. So, it was developed by a company called Vision. Now, these chaps were behind Seek and Destroy, Roadkill, Overhill, which is a shooter. And some of these are quite big games. The publisher was a company called Acid. Now, they published Guardian, Skid Marks, 1, 2, and Super. Now, that's the car driving game. So it gives you an idea straight away. They're a huge company. Centre Court, I think that's supposed to be one of the best tennis games on the Amiga. I've not actually played it, I will say though. I did, as I was doing a bit of research on the publisher, I did notice that Centre Court 2 never came out, but I think it was recently, in the last year or two, released as a file, and I think maybe now it's on WHD load. Anyway, something to have a look at if you're into tennis games. It came out in 1993, so it's probably about mid-popularity of the Amiga's lifespan. I think that's after the 1200 release. And it came on 3 discs. Now, it's a typical platformer, and at the time it cost £25.99, which is a bit on the high price, especially for the time at Amiga games, because they were mostly priced around £15 to £20, so it was only like the really big games, I think, at this time coming out, so this must have been something special, or they saw it as something special. Now, the coder behind this was a chap called Paul Andrews. He was basically all the games I mentioned before, like Seek and Destroy, Roadkill, Overhill, Overhill, it was Overkill. He was behind them as well, so he was quite prolific on a lot of the big games. The graphics were done by Rodney Smith. Again, he was involved in those games as well. And then the music, which is a very tough name to, I'm looking at this on a piece of paper and I'm just dreading my pronunciation. It is Blair Zuppicich. Zuppicich. Yes, that's very complicated. Again, he seems to have only been involved at the same company between Acid and Vision, and they were all involved in those series of games. So quite good developers. They got a good mix there. Sports games. I think Guardian was a 3D game. Racing games. You know, the shooters and everything. You know, quite complicated. The game itself is a 1 meg game, and the cover pronounces it as the biggest Amiga platform game in existence. You'll probably understand that when I get to the level count out. I did do some research because I was trying to find a copy of the manual, because of course I'm playing this on a mix of emulators and my 1200 on WHD load. But I just couldn't find one, and the best I could find was a single line reference from it. And there's no like full Wikipedia page for it or detailed pages on Hall of Light or anything beyond the basics. But the best I could find was Woody is an elf who is to retrieve a magic crystal which was stolen by evil forces. And that's it. That's the entire story of the game. And when you fire it up, there's no like fancy movie or text scrolling. I think that's pretty much it. That's all you're going to get. So fantastic story straight away. Very imaginative. The cover itself is well, it's a bit basic from what I saw, but you're a wizard out there who it turns out is a royal or something. It's very, very odd. It's a very strange game. When you first load the game, you're greeted by this, it's very techno, strong music, and it's quite interesting, and it's a great opening, and you do wonder later on as you're playing the game why this sort of music is not pumping throughout. It's probably one of the best intros I've heard in quite a while, especially for a platform game. It's like a cheesy sort of cheeriness for the rest of the music, so the opening seems very, very off, but it's an awesome bit of music. Now, the game itself, it's got 60 levels, which is quite impressive for an Amiga platformer. I think at this time, you're looking at things like Super Mario World. I know it had about 92 levels, which was an astonishing amount, I think. Was it 92 or 90? I might be going a bit off kilter there. But the way this opens is you get a world map which you're overlooking, and it's very Rainbow Islands in style. It's bright, it's colourful, and there's lots of castles on islands and things. And the way it works is you select a castle, and then it opens dots in a surrounding area, and you basically get a choice of which path you want to take. And the main drive of the map is you have to get to the castles just to complete them, but you can pretty much do them in any order. But to get through the levels, you have to collect a certain amount of coins to proceed through doors. You know, pretty general stuff for a platformer. But the actual way it works with the map is, I mean, that's very, very similar to, Mario Brothers 3 in a way. That way, your path is sort of set, but you can diverge off it a bit. It's not as, I don't feel it's as free-form as Super Mario World, where even though you're on set roads, it felt like you were stretching off to explore different areas. This does sort of have a set path with very slight alterations here and there, so it's a bit of an odd mix. Now, of course, with it being an Amiga platformer, it's got the standard up for jump, and you press fire as well for it. Nothing too exciting there. When you run in left and right, the character does have a fair bit of momentum, but again, a lot of platformers, they all have this sort of thing, so it just depends whether or not you like it with this game in particular. I do find with this, it does work quite well. The main thing you're collecting is coins, there's like hearts, boxes to bop your head on. It's similar to Mario. Chest pickups with power-ups in, that sort of thing. Now, you do have a health bar, a health bar, so there's no one-hit kills at least. The controls are very responsive. I found it to be quite fluid. It's bright, colourful graphics. I mean, it works very well for the Amiga. You can tell it's a nice, strong, colourful Amiga game. There's power-ups along the way. Every time you get one, your character, and this is actually quite a good way it works. There's like several levels, so there's like a prince, which is like a scepter, which makes him jump high and moves a bit quicker. He can kick as well at the same time. There's also a crown, which turns him into like a king. This is a very odd one with that. I don't know what the story is, and it doesn't tell you, but the king can fire stars and stuff, and the great thing is that the more power-ups you get like this, the quicker you can move, and you can maneuver through the levels a lot easier. Throughout, there's a fair few bonus levels. One of the ones I really enjoyed is you actually get a chance to ride a roller coaster, and it moves with a fair bit of speed. You can't actually fall off it. I mean, when you jump in the air, you always end up landing back down, and it's just a coin collector form, but it's a nice use of the Amiga's graphics. It's very playful. It's very, in a way, it's similar to the James Pond games, especially with the nice big chunky graphics. It's bright, it's colourful like Rainbow Islands. It's a very good mix for what is essentially it's meant to be an average Amiga platformer. Now, I felt the levels were quite well designed for what it was, although it did come with quite a few glaring problems. I mean, the thing is, the graphics were quite well drawn. It was great looking, again, bright and colourful, typical stuff, but the enemies themselves had a very funny issue where they respawn a bit too quickly, I found. And you come running up to a point like you climb on top of a couple of pipes or an object, you jump up a bit more, you might fall down slightly and then the screen scrolls down, and some enemies you've killed before have just come back. And there's not too much of a distance to keep hitting that repeatedly. And it's not a big issue, but it can be quite annoying. I mean, there's a few points where you're trying to climb something or scale, say, the equivalent of a tower or some pipes, and then you're stuck at the bottom because if you fall back down, 2 or 3 enemies might re-pop up down there, and there's no way avoiding that, which is a bit of a shame. Now, the other problem I did discover, even though you've got like a health bar, when you hit an enemy, there's no invincibility, there's no knockback, and just walking through a single enemy can drain a big chunk of the health bar quite quickly, and if you just stay there, it just drains completely and you lose a life. I mean, you start with 3 lives as it is, but you've got to be fairly careful of that when you're walking around, because there's a few points where you might think, well, if I just bounce off this point, there's an enemy on, I'd probably be okay. And a couple of times I didn't hit an enemy right enough because I wasn't just on top. Like Mario style, where you're supposed to bounce off the head. So I went through them. It's almost like walked through them and lost a big chunk of energy. And then one of the other problems is it is quite challenging. I mean, it might just be me. I'm terrible at this sort of a game, but I got lost a fair few times. The enemies also have this bit of a strange thing. I don't know how to describe it really, but the enemies, they all have sort of like a pattern what they move, left to right or swooping or doing something in a sort of a limited area. But when you come across them the first time in a new part of the level, because the levels are quite big, you're not used to it. And there's not a good sign of them turning round. So if they get to the end of the path, if you're walking behind them, they'll not suddenly turn on you and then attack you. But if they're in a set path and they get to the end, they spin round at the end of the path and come back towards you. But the thing is, the turnaround time, it's almost as if it's missing several frames, and it's very, very quick, and you don't get enough time to actually respond or do anything about it. So you can lose a big chunk of energy that way. It's again, it might just be down to me, but it was just one of them things when I was playing which annoyed me when it shouldn't have done really. Graphically, one of the problems it did have, and I've actually I'm finding that very odd, but there's no parallax scrolling with the backgrounds. They're just very static and nothing happens. But pretty much, the number of Amiga games with that sort of scrolling on, especially for this when it's like a 1 meg game, so it should be there as standard, and there's just nothing there. So it doesn't create very good looking levels for the background, but luckily enough, the levels and designs are quite nice, and all the blocks and things look great in that, but the backgrounds are a bit of a letdown. You just think they just put a bit more effort in there, or a bit more extra coding. You could have had something really, really nice. I suppose I'm expecting too much. Music in the game, it was very cute, very twee, don't really know how to describe it, but I can't even, I just played it about 10 minutes before I recorded it, and I couldn't even hum a tune back to you right now. It's just, which is a shame, because the opening music was fantastic. It really thought, as I was listening, I thought, the music on this is going to be great, but the level music, it's just boring. It shouldn't be like that. It's very cutesy. I suppose it's fitting for the game, but it needed that extra bit more. It needed just something special. The enemies themselves, there's lots and lots of them as you go through the game, and yeah, they're all different, and the lots in number, but I didn't find, it's like if you play a Mario game and you've got like the Goombas or Goombas or whatever. Oh my god, I'm losing my mind. Or the turtle, and the shells and stuff. It's got very set enemies. It's just, I don't know, they just don't stand out. There's nothing there that says to me, that's such and such, or like it's one of the Hammer Brothers or something like that. There's just nothing special to it, and it's a bit disappointing. At the time of release, it had some very, very mixed reviews. I think AM Computing gave it the highest score at about 92%. CU Amiga gave it 86%, The One 70%, Amiga Action 75%, and then Amiga Power towards the bottom 70%. And there was a few other mags, but none of them went lower than Amiga Power's at 70%. And I can pretty much understand them scores. feels like a mixed bag at times. I mean, as a whole, the game it keeps reminding me of RoboCop. It's got some humour mixed in there. It's got some entertaining level design and stuff. It feels like it just needed a little bit more to make it something special. But I could certainly see why a magazine reviewer would be sat there thinking, oh, this is just another bland platformer. But at the same time, I think it does deserve a closer look, because there is some special stuff in there. It does has that certain thing about it that makes it worth playing. I mean, I did have a lot of fun with it. I put a couple of hours into it, and I've also had to film some footage for the YouTube channel, and I've no complaints back. And I've put this on my list to play again. I am going to work my way through it, I think, over time. One of the good things it did, and I keep thinking back to, because it's quite clever especially seeing it as a platformer, but the power-ups where, you go from like being a prince and work your way up to the crown with the king, and you get better and better at moving, and you can fire stars and things, and it gives a very weird, like a sense of progression. It almost sounds like it's an RPG, but it's not that complicated. But it's very strange in a platform game, and I'm not used to that in this sort of a title, but it does work actually quite well, and it's probably one of the most unique things about it. But they are actually great power-ups. I mean, there's throughout the entire game, it's huge. There's lots and lots. I mean, there's 60 levels, but I mean, it's filled with like hidden wall tricks, invisible doors and things. To get to secret areas, you have to find doors and work your way through to get pickups and things. And then inside you've got like hidden chests, which are filled with coins and more power-ups. And the levels themselves are very, very expansive. And you usually have a timer limit of about 8 to 10 minutes. And the levels do fit that. There is quite a lot to them. I mean, and there's a couple of times where I actually got lost within the game, and I just couldn't figure out where to go. And it's not because I don't think I was being terrible at the game, but it's just because it was designed quite well, and it would guide you down like these little rabbit holes of areas to get stuck. And then if you got, you'd be stuck there scratching your head, but if you wander back and start exploring, you'll find another way around or work around it. So on that front, it worked really, really well. On the whole, I mean, it's designed probably one of do I dare say it's probably one of the better platformers on the Amiga. It controls well, the levels are designed well. It's a shame about the music, but the fact that I had so much fun playing it, it's a very, very satisfying game to actually play, and I will be going back to it. I suppose it's a bit like Batman or RoboCop. I always go back to they're probably not the best games in the world, but if I enjoy them enough, then they're worth returning to. Anyway, so yeah, I think it's a bit of a hidden gem. It's probably it's not a 5 out of 5 or anything crazy like that. For me, it's probably a 4 out of 5, but I can see why the magazines were quite down on it. And with that, I think we'll end the podcast there. As always, guys, thanks for listening. Please, if you've got time, come and follow me on Twitter. It's at AMIGArama Pod. Or AMIGArama.com to leave some comments, or if you've got any time at all, for the love of God, please leave me an iTunes review. It is appreciated. Until next week, guys.